Hello, and welcome to this presentation on the European Biotech Act, the what and the why. This presentation is aimed towards pharma professionals, medtech professionals, biotech professionals, and RA/QA professionals that would be interested in this new proposed European Biotech Act. My name is Faisal Kamal, and I am operating out of Copenhagen in Denmark. All right, so you heard my name, Faisal Kamal, but who am I? Well, I have a decade's worth of experience in working with device regulatory affairs. I hold a number of certifications, but beyond that, I have presented on various occasions to authorities, various interest organizations, corporations, and educational institutions on regulatory texts, standards, and these kinds of issues. So I hold a bachelor's in biology and a master's in pharmaceutical sciences from Copenhagen University in Denmark, and I am born and raised in Denmark. All right? So over the next approximately 20 minutes, you will learn a number of things, and you should try and use what you have learned to see if you can answer these questions. All right? So there are 5 questions. So think about this as I'm giving this presentation. Who is behind this proposal? What are arguments for creating a new regulation? What is the envisioned goal of using AI with biotechnology? Why biomedical medicines could become central for clinical trials? And how big of a change do you think is being proposed here? All right? So think about this during the presentation, and we'll come back to this. All right, so let's start off with the very first question. Who is behind all of this? Here is the gentleman called Oliver Valhelyi. I'm probably butchering his name, but he is the EU Commissioner for Health and Animal Welfare. And here's a quote from him: "We have to make it easier to innovate in Europe. We have to make it easier to manufacture in Europe." And I think that quote really sums up very nicely what this European Biotech Act is about, what the impetus is, but we will be going into that in depth. But this man is obviously not exactly the most, probably not the most, somebody you would think would be in this position. His background is not from within health, as was his predecessors. His background is in the legal domain. He has a Master's of European Legal Studies, which he, by the way, obtained at Aalborg University, which is right here in Denmark. I'm operating out of Copenhagen, but Aalborg is obviously in Denmark, in Jutland, and this happened in 1994. Well, we say that he is behind the regulation, but really, obviously, a regulation is the result of the work of many people. However, you should know that he is not exactly a straightforward and you could say problem-free guy. He's considered to be a controversial man. You may look him up and make up your own mind. Oliver is from Hungary, a good friend of the Hungarian president, as I understand it. So there is that part of it as well. All right? So enough said. Let's look at the proposal itself. And I think it's always a good idea to start by looking at what the title actually says. So here's the title: Proposal for a Regulation of the European Parliament and of the Council on establishing a framework of measures for strengthening Union's biotechnology and biomanufacturing sectors, particularly in the area of health. And then it goes on to state a number of regulations or legislative texts that it wants to amend. So this proposal is also about amending a number of legislative texts. Let's go through them one by one. So we have 178/2002, which is the Food Safety Regulation. We have 1394/2007, which is on advanced therapy medicinal products. We have 536/2014, which is about the European Clinical Trials Regulations. This is a big one. We have 2019-6, which is on veterinary medicinal products. We have 2024-795, which is establishing the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform, also known as STEP. And we have 2024-1938, which is on standards of quality and safety for substances of human origins intended for human application, also known as SOHO. Note, this proposal also takes into account other regulatory amendment proposals that are right now being reviewed, such as a proposal for amending the MDR, the Medical Device Regulation. All of these things are happening at the same time. So if you look at the proposal, it is actually a lengthy document. It's 258 pages, but it's only a part of it that really is the regulation, the proposed regulation. And that proposed regulation consists of 10 chapters and 67 articles. The entire proposal also includes something called the explanatory memorandum, and this presentation is based off of that explanatory memorandum. The regulation is supposed to enter into force on the 20th day following that of its publication in the official journal of the European Union. Now, who is it for? Well, it is for startups and industry who wish to harness unfulfilled potentials of biotechnology capabilities within the EU. But you could also say it is to make RA great again. Yes, regulatory professionals have been fighting in many situations the regulation, which has been it has been very difficult to follow the regulation and be innovative. Obviously, this is why this Biotech Act is here. It's going to be amending a number of regulations, and it's going to try and make it easier. Now, why do we need a European Biotechnology Act? This is actually the main, the core of this presentation. We are going to be looking at the explanatory memorandum and looking at all of those observations that explain why this regulation is proposed. So next, we will go through these observations one by one. Here, basically, we will understand what they are highlighting as being currently, you could say, wrong, and what they therefore propose to address with a new regulation. So let's go right into the meat of this. All right. So there are perceived barriers for startups. The proposal speaks of current structural barriers in areas such as clinical development, regulation, manufacturing, and that leads EU startups to go outside of EU. The argument here is that the EU startups go outside EU, and this is due to barriers in these areas that should be addressed. All right. Next, we have biotechnology and biomanufacturing. They represent a fast-growing but underserved pillar supporting multiple areas. So there's a focus on biotechnology and biomanufacturing, obviously, in this regulation, and they describe it as a pillar that crosses into key areas, including health. The area has remarkable features. Biotechnology and biomanufacturing as a pillar is remarkable because this area has grown twice as fast as overall EU economy. It represents 38.1 billion euros of Union GDP as of 2022. The EU is actually world leading in biotechnology science with a publication record in this domain. Yet, EU lags behind other regions in fulfilling the full potential. They highlight that biotechnology and biomanufacturing are interesting because they cross several areas and are a great candidate to being kind of the next big thing for EU economy. The argument is that something should be done so that EU does not lag behind other regions and fulfills the full potential it has. Scaling is important, but not easy. It's another observation they make. So EU-level deployment of industrial facilities at scale is weakened. And this is a very typical, you could say, argument. It is weakened by fragmented governance and suboptimal coordination across member states. So this leads to underused biomanufacturing potential. It's a very typical, you could say, argument when you are talking about EU regulation. This would be a very good reason to make in EU regulation when you have fragmented governments and suboptimal coordination across member states. The focus here is on biomanufacturing specifically and allowing industrial facilities to be deployed at scale. Argument is that member states are showing fragmented governance and suboptimal coordination, and this is not making it easy to scale biomanufacturing up to its maximum potential. All right? Skill shortages are becoming a hindrance. Yes, so skill shortages are described currently in R&D, regulatory affairs, AI, data analytics. These are believed to further hinder Europe's competitiveness. So they argue about these skill shortages and that they hinder Europe's competitiveness, and obviously this also needs to be addressed. There is growing gender gap and untapped diversity. Yes, so other factors highlighted in this context is widening gender gap and untapped potential of a diverse workforce. So this certainly made me think that we're talking about the possibility of targeting these areas when solving the skills issue. When we have a widening gender gap and untapped potential of diverse workforce, well, those groups would be prime candidates to kind of recruit into the system. So in one sense, you could say that it is about killing two flies with one stroke by addressing these factors in relation to the skills issue. Unfavorable funding and VC dynamics. So they don't just stop at the technical part here. They go actually into the funding dynamics. Unfavorable funding and market dynamics in EU. Really, when you're talking about it, you're talking about limited EU startup funding and fragmented EU stock market. And so this leads 66, this is what has led 66 out of 67 biotech companies to go public in non-EU stock exchanges. So really, it's about making it more attractive for those players to start in EU as opposed to other non-EU markets. Now, they also focus on AI. So AI can do more for biotech, which it isn't doing at the moment. Massive potential for AI, they believe, in biotech, and EU should tap this and address obstacles. And the obstacles they mention is limited testing environments, fragmented data, and the desire to explore the full life cycle of biotechnology products for AI potential, particularly for medicine. So although there is an AI Act, they wish to address the usage of AI specifically for biotechnology products in the proposed regulation. So the idea being the whole biotechnology product life cycle, where are those areas where AI could really benefit? And this is not just a suggestion. They want to put it into the regulation so that it makes it easy to get that done. New risks and legal inconsistency. That's also an interesting observation. They describe that although the AI Act now exists and it presents a uniform legal framework for AI systems dealing with AI-related risks, they also highlight that biotechnology now is introducing new biosecurity risks and absent or divergent national rules on screening for biotech products with potential for misuse. So the argument is related to safety. And you could say that perhaps this is really at the core of the proposal if you look at it from a citizen's perspective. The argument is that new biosecurity risks have arisen, and this, of course, needs to be addressed. It is believed that this leads to raised compliance at the moment, the way that it leads to raised compliance, inability to offer level playing fields, and weakens prevention. So, again, an observation that makes it a good case to have a regulation. Now, I did try and find these biosecurity risks that what could they be? They mention something called synthetic DNA of dangerous pathogens, and I was able to find this BBC article that related to Sin61, which is a synthetic E. coli bacteria, and this is a fully synthetic genome. So there's a fully synthetic genome that was developed of this E. coli bacteria. And obviously, since it's fully synthetic, it can be modified. So this could be modified in numerous ways, and it seems clear that there is indeed a risk that such fully synthetic DNA pathogens could become increasingly available in the future. So again, an observation that makes it pertinent to have a regulation that addresses this. All right, so here's another observation. There's a decline in commercial research. This, I think, is very impactful. So they focus on a decline in the EU's global share of commercially sponsored clinical trials from 2013 to 2023. And it's gone from 22% in 2013 to 12% in 2023. So they associate this to a number of observations. Firstly, they talk about the EU regulatory framework and state that the EU is less attractive a place to bring cutting-edge research and innovation into marketable products due to fragmentation and complexity. So that's the first point they make. They also state there is a move away from small molecule research, which has been the type of research that has been traditionally focused on in Europe, to development of biomedical medicines. So it's a very different kind of research. And China has gone from 5% to 18% of global share of this commercially sponsored clinical trials. And it is believed that regulatory and financial systems agility, coupled with focus on biomedical research, is what is causing this. So this is aimed directly at the Clinical Trials Act, and the argument is in part that EU will become more attractive for commercially sponsored clinical trials if the regulatory framework allows for faster decision times on clinical trials applications, in particular in relation to evidence base for biomedical medicines. Other regions are believed to have more agility and faster decision times on clinical trial applications. They state that this is within 60 days, as opposed to an average of 113 days in the EU. Clinical trial regulation must adapt to support latest research. Okay, so this is, you could say, this is the last point we will go into, and this is related to the previous slide. So clinical trials in EU affect many processes by strengthening the evidence base. Clinical guidelines required, the marketing authorizations required it, health technology assessment. As biological medicines related clinical trials are on the rise, this should lead to more manufacturing, increased and earlier submissions for marketing authorizations, increased EU clinical data in marketing authorization applications. And so this really highlights the points of the last slide. All right. Now, can you answer the questions we brought you in the beginning? Let's reflect. So, take a few minutes to think about this and go through these questions by yourself. It's a good way to see if you've learned about today's topic. And if you think that this introduction to the Biotech Act was interesting, well, keep learning with me. And why don't you continue the conversation on one of the podcast or one of the platforms that I'm on. You can find me on most of the largest online platforms. If you have not yet had the chance to listen to my podcast, by the way, The Circle, I encourage you to give it a try. Here you can meet some of the top profiles and most amazing people from within health tech and technology domains, and get to know them as they disclose which sci-fi shows or movies really inspired them. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And finally, you can find articles from top content creators, gain access to latest course materials, and connect with us directly on our website, www.thecircleinsider.com. There will be many more videos that go into the meat of the Biotech Act, and those will also be available on thecircleinsider.com. I encourage you to follow me, and if you like this video, I encourage you to comment and share to all of your favorite platforms. Thank you for today.